welcome back to Movies with Michael. In the world of movies, the importance and impact of Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings trilogy cannot and should not be ignored. Though having been started 20 years ago, many people are still watching these films today, either for the first time or the 20th time. The films present an adaptation of a jam-packed epic with dramatized medieval warfare of the trilogy of books by the same name written by renowned 20th century English author J.R.R. Tolkien. There is a ton to talk about with each and every one of these films, but today we're going to talk about the first film of the trilogy, The Fellowship of the Ring. In my not-so-humble opinion, this is still the best prologue I've seen in any movie ever. The narration from Cate Blanchett's Galadriel tells you just what you need to know, even if you haven't read the books, to start on your journey throughout the entire narrative. I think the problem with a lot of narration in other films is that it either tells too little or it feels like it needs to tell too much because the audience is uninformed of what's going on. But this movie doesn't do that. It even covers what already Middle-earth fans know as The Hobbit in just a couple of lines to show how the characters of Gollum and Bilbo Baggins fit into the narrative that we're about to see unfold. But no matter how you look at it, we have our main antagonist, the Dark Lord Sauron, we have our main plot device, the Ring, and the cause of the story, man's failure to destroy the Ring. The opening scene of Act 1 shows us the Shire and its inhabitants, the Hobbits. The extended edition features Bilbo Baggins, played by Ian Holm, giving exposition summarizing who the Hobbits are and what they do in their everyday lives, which is nice, because that tells us the fact that the Hobbits have boring and, well, normal lives, but the theatrical cut shows us this. Frodo Baggins, played by Elijah Wood, is introduced as someone who jumps at the moment to do or hear about anything different from his everyday life, which is why he's so excited when Gandalf the Grey, played by Ian McKellen, comes to town for his Uncle Bilbo's birthday party. In that fantastic birthday party scene, we are introduced to Samwise Gamgee, played by Sean Astin, Merry Brandybuck, played by Dominic Monaghan, and Pippin Took, played by Billy Boyd. We'll talk about each of these hobbits a bit more later. From here, the movie moves at a nice pace to show and tell us that Frodo has the ring now, Gandalf discovering that it is Sauron's ring, and that Frodo needs to start moving because the Black Riders have begun hunting for him because Gollum has ratted his family name out. So Frodo and his reluctant group of friends set out to the village of Bree, while avoiding getting caught by the Black Riders. Now let's talk about that fight between Gandalf and Sarman, played by Christopher Lee. Now, as movie watchers, when we hear a description like wizard battle, we probably will think of different scenes from the Harry Potter franchise, right? Well, this scene is nothing like that. There are no beams of light anywhere, no spells being spoken, just the invisible power of the two wizards. I think this is more appropriate than if we saw any fire and lightning, because these two guys are immortal spirits in the shape of old men, so their powers wouldn't necessarily be seen, or I should say they don't have to be seen. Anyway, back to the other characters. As we are sitting at Bree's the Prancing Pony, we are introduced to the third main character of the story and my favorite character in the trilogy, Aragorn, son of Arathorn, played by Viggo Mortensen. This character is introduced as one set apart, in the corner, not wanting to be in the bulk of the party. He's an outcast, but his character's importance just keeps growing in every one of his scenes. The Ranger immediately cements himself as Frodo's protector, not necessarily because he likes Frodo so quickly, but because he knows the importance of the ring more than any of the hobbits do. Now, I will say that the character of Aragorn was changed from book to film. In the book, Aragorn is ready to accept his destiny as the King of Gondor and to take up his ancestor's sword. In the film, though, Aragorn hates that path. He has chosen exile, as Elrond later puts it. I noticed this much more in my most recent rewatch of the films. Again, this doesn't hurt the films in any way, but for those who are looking for a more faithful depiction of Aragorn, it could get annoying. It is here that we get our main confrontation with Sauron's most terrible servants, the Nazgul, seen only up until this point as horsemen with black cloaks. On the top of Weathertop, we see them for what they are. In the Wraith world, Frodo sees the old, worn, and twisted faces of what once were mighty men of old. These wraiths are the most prevalent in this film as a group, as the Nine, and they are the most threatening here as well, even if their screen time is about to end. Now, this is where a major change happens, replacing Glorfindel with Arwen. Now, for those who don't know, an elf warrior named Glorfindel and his companions were the ones to deliver the dying Frodo to Rivendell in the book. I think this was a very smart change, though, because if Glorfindel had saved him, then we'd have to have more screen time and exposition explaining Glorfindel's importance in the larger narrative. Otherwise, he's just a character that's important for one scene and that's it, which I think would be more disrespectful than it needed to be. Having Arwen save Frodo introduces the audience to her and sets her up to have more involvement in the story in upcoming scenes, while also hinting at her and Aragorn's romance that'll be explored later. After the apparent vanquishment of the Nazgul and Frodo's rescue and recovery, we arrive at the Council. The Council that must decide what to do with the ring. We have our 4 sets of Middle-earth's people: men, elves, dwarves, and hobbits. We can detect that from how they all speak to each other, they don't really like each other a whole lot, and they can't decide what to do with the ring. The elves, men, and dwarves of the council fall into the situation of willing to destroy the ring, but they're not sure how, or they know how, but they are hopeless in any possible attempt to destroy it. This is where Frodo and the audience realize that it is he, Frodo Baggins, the Hobbit, that must be the ring bearer. In doing this, he allows the weight of responsibility to depart from the other races, while at the same time giving each race an opportunity to support him, to be in his fellowship. The next few sequences are when we start to get the huge cinematic part of this trilogy, the airborne moving shots of the breathtaking New Zealand mountains that we keep getting more and more of as the movies go on. We also get some more character development for some of our side characters and how they give input for what direction they think the Fellowship should go. It is also here that we start to get more of the fantasy adventure tropes, many of which were started by these books. We have the magic door with the riddle to solve. We have an all but nameless monster attacking our characters in The Watcher in the Water. We have the journey in the dark through the ruined and desolate kingdom of Droadelf. We are attacked by a swarm of goblins and orcs and a cave troll. We are running from hordes of goblins, and then the confrontation against the ancient supernatural enemy with elemental weapons. That scene when Gandalf stands at the bridge of Khazad-dûm and fights back the Balrog called Durin's Bane is one of the most recognizable sequences in the entire trilogy, and that is no surprise. I'm going to give my deeper thoughts on Gandalf's death later on in the video. Of all the sequences that have been repeated or reskinned in other works, the Lothlorien sequence is the most interesting. When I rewatched this film recently, I realized how unfamiliar this scene really is. This scene is creepy because they really went for the witch side of the Galadriel character, who is played to perfection by Cate Blanchett. This sequence for our characters serves as the recovery, the break from their quest. That's all good, but Frodo gets the encouragement and caution from Galadriel. We also get, well, I like to think of it as the visual confirmation from that little scene where Galadriel shows Frodo what would happen if she took the ring, of Gandalf's warning earlier to Frodo about giving him the ring. All in all, the whole sequence, as I said, is just a break from the emotional outburst that we just got from Gandalf's death. Now the finale. Amon Hen has a lot going on, and it's all awesome. We have the lurking threat of Saruman's newly born forces, we have Sean Bean as Boromir going mad over the ring but then immediately seeing his mistake, we have Frodo realizing that he has to go it alone on the quest, and then we have the forest fight with the Uruk-hai. I like this book to film change too, because having Saruman's forces come and attack our company sets him up as the main villain of the next film. 2 more things I'd like to talk about before we close today. The film crushes you with Gandalf's death. It picks you up for 30 minutes, only to crush you again with the death of Boromir. Now, even if you didn't know that Gandalf would, spoiler alert, come back in the second film, a lot of people are more impacted by the death of Boromir. We just saw Boromir go insane, but then we saw him become so desperate to make amends to Frodo. And then he comes charging into the fight, he blows his horn, he's killing orcs left and right, and then he's shot by 3 arrows. I like how they showed Boromir's quick shift from madness to sadness and regret. That is where he is better than his father, who we'll discuss for the third film. For those who have never read the book, though, I suggest you listen up now. Boromir only goes to being the bad guy, if you can even call him that, in the scene with Frodo in the woods at the end of the novel. For the rest of his time in the book, though, he's the best a man can be. However, like with Aragorn, the filmmakers decided to change the character and made Boromir more of a contrast to Aragorn. But anyway, Boromir's and also Gandalf's deaths serve as the shots of hopelessness, the hopelessness of the journey itself. Our final scene, we have Sam being the best friend, chasing after Frodo and practically making Frodo make him come with him. Aragorn is the inspiration to his companions that they need to rescue Merry and Pippin from the Uruk-hai. So, despite the tragic deaths of two of the Fellowship's members, the journey must continue, and the hunt begins. This is my favorite film of all time. I've seen it so many times, and every single time I've watched it, I'm reminded of how good it really is. There isn't really anything I could pick at or be quite critical of, which is why I'm going to give Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, a 10 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching this movie review today. Please remember to leave a like and comment down below what you think about The Fellowship of the Ring. Is it your favorite of the trilogy, or did you have another movie in the trilogy at number 1? That we'll talk about later. And please remember to subscribe for more content about movies. I'm Michael, and I'll catch you next time.